Join me now for another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. A returning guest who, if you're in the Twitter streets, you may have had a run-in with him in the past. You may have had a conflict with him, but Sean with a W vouches for him. So I, of course, have to vouch for him. He is the host, the voice, the face of Hawks Fan TV. Alex, welcome back to Knicks Film School, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Glad to be back. Sean is good peoples over there. One of the few Knicks fans that I rock with. But no, Sean's cool. Love him. Much love to him and the rest of the team over there. And of course, shout out to KFS for letting me on the show.
Of course. And it's funny that the Knicks Hawks rivalry, if it still is one, that started a couple of years ago in the playoffs, listen, Sean, it's more of a report back to me type of thing with Sean with the Twitter arguments that go on. There's a Trae Young, Jalen Brunson, Dejounte Murray. I know Halliburton gets thrown in there too. I think they're all like really good young guards, and that's like probably my take. There's a tier and they're all really good in that tier. But the back and forth gets fun, of course. And so to the Knicks fans that are watching this, I promise you, if my vouch matters for anything, I enjoyed my conversation with Alex the last time he was here. And I'm going to assume, because you're looking at my hat, you're a Braves fan too. Is it all Atlanta for you? Okay.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that's my signed Javi Lopez plaque, one of the greatest catchers of all time. So, yeah, I'm a Braves fan. Sorry for the Mets, again, not making the playoffs this year. So
Hold on. You should have ended your sentence at, I'm sorry for the Mets. Believe me, it went a completely different direction this year than when you spend more money on a team than anybody else. But I've made a promise to our listeners that I would stop talking about baseball. And I made it 2 minutes into this podcast before I broke that promise. But let's talk about this matchup between the Knicks and the Hawks, specifically this basketball team that you're a fan of, that you cover, that has a bit of a new look to them, but it's more since the last time the Knicks saw the Hawks, which if you go back to last year, the final game before the All-Star break, I believe, was the last time the Knicks and Hawks played. And it was also the last time that Nate McMillan was the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. And we were doing a playback watch party that night. And the biggest takeaway we had from watching the game was like, this is a team that's quit on its coach. If I could take you back to that moment, do you have that same interpretation? Did I nail that? That it was like definitely the end of the road by that point with the head coach?
Yeah, and I think it was it's been brewing since like pretty much like after like the 20th game of the season last year, and then I was one of the first to report like on the fact that Trae got in a pretty heated verbal argument with Nate McMillan, which resulted in Trae pretty much leaving practice early that day. And then, of course, Nate sat him out for like the next game, pretty much didn't play him. So he was wearing street clothes. And then ever since that moment, kind of went downhill from there. But it wasn't even just Trae. That's the crazy part. And I know Trae gets like this label, or has gotten this label, about he's a coach killer. You know, he ran Lloyd Pierce out of town, who was a horrendous coach, like literally by far the worst, probably NBA basketball coach of all time. Like that's not even an exaggeration.
Of all time. Okay.
Yeah. First time head coach, Lloyd Pierce, just terrible. Every single player, from what I know, disliked Lloyd Pierce just because he had zero respect for the entire team. So that was a wash. And then Nate McMillan takes over. We make that ECF run, and then everyone's like, oh, Nate McMillan's this great coach. That was the first time he's ever, gotten past the first round in his whole coaching career. And, I always attribute that to the fact that Lloyd Pierce was gone, Nate took over, and you and I could have been on the sidelines that year, and we could have taken the team to the ECF too. They caught lightning in a bottle, and they were playing to basically avenge and make a point that Lloyd Pierce was holding them back. But yeah, Nate, not the best coach in the world. He's been fired at every single tenure he's been to. I appreciate what he's done, but Quin Snyder, the Quin Snyder era has begun. I'm excited. It's unfortunate that we lost the first game of the season, but I'm very optimistic about this season and this team. So I'm excited.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about not necessarily the Charlotte game, because I did watch the game this afternoon, and this is why you need to watch tape. Trae actually didn't play as bad as the box score would have said. I know he shot poorly. And the turnovers killed you, but like you get to the line 15 times, you're still a weapon. And that fourth quarter, a couple of his shots were short. I looked like the entire team's couple shots were short, but I thought I was expecting to tune into a train wreck, and from my perspective, it wasn't that. But we'll talk about that in a second. I want to stay with the coaching conversation that we're having, because the uptick that you got with Nate McMillan that you're talking about, that then went back down to then Quin Snyder. So to the uneducated Knicks fan, what's different about the Hawks? They're about a 500 team after the coaching change was made. And then, you have that playing game against the Heat that was really impressive. And then you take Boston to 6. And there's obviously expectations. What is different about the Hawks now after the coaching change?
Yeah, I think we're just going to see a lot more higher, faster paced offense. So a lot more up tempo, a lot more threes being taken. Nate McMillan is known for running a very kind of prehistoric type of offense. His whole, game plan is to hunt mismatches and really settle for like good mid-range shots. And in today's modern NBA, threes are obviously much more, greater than twos. And that's kind of Quin's mentality, right? He wants a high-flying offense, up-tempo, get out in transition, and kind of, score easy buckets in transition, and also shoot a lot of threes, space the court, and let our shooters shoot. And that was kind of the thing that held us back last year, I think, is our offense was very much ISO one-on-one style play, right? It was either his turn, my turn with Trae Young and Dejounte Murray, and they would kind of work in isolation and then, either drive to the paint, hit the open man, or they would just, make a shot and create a shot for themselves. We saw preseason the Quin Snyder offense, a lot more off-ball movement. Trae was more involved in off-ball, and everyone was getting touches. That's what I noticed. A lot of people were getting touches in every single possession. It wasn't just, you inbound the ball, Trae dribbles it up full court, and then he makes one pass or shoots, and that's pretty much the entire offense, right? Or Dejounte. In preseason, we saw a lot more ball movement, everyone getting touches. And we also saw our athletic big men actually initiate the offense from like the top of the key or off a missed rebound or off an inbound pass. So that's something that we haven't seen. It's usually always been Trae or Dejounte kind of bringing the ball up the court. But Jalen Johnson, Sadiq Bey, et cetera, these guys are moving the ball, bringing the ball up court, and initiating that offense. And I think we're going to see a lot of that this coming season. And I think it also comes down to trust. Jalen Johnson is a young player. Not many people probably know him just yet, but he's a 6'9", like 230-pound athletic four that can dribble, pass, and play make. He's very identical to Ben Simmons, in my opinion, with his play style. But he's not soft like Ben Simmons. So I'm excited for Jalen. And I think you're just going to see an offense that moves the ball more, a lot more off-ball movement, and a lot more threes. We shot a lot of threes last night. Unfortunately, we just couldn't hit them. A lot of open looks. We took 29 threes and only made 5 threes. So that was unfortunate. But if we made even just 5 more of those wide open looks, it would have been a pretty comfortable win. But here we are. So I think first game jitters, we'll see what happens the rest of the season.
To your point about Jalen Johnson, 21 points on 13 shots for Knicks fans that didn't watch the game, which I'm assuming is everybody but me. But the point being, I did notice the everybody gets to touch the ball type of aspect to the offense. Sadiq Bey, I noticed was a lot more involved. It seemed like he had an athletic play every other time I would look up and stuff from my notes. Be like, Sadiq Bey made a nice play. That's nice. Bogdanovich off the bench, he's still getting his opportunity. So I'm curious against the Knicks type of like guard the rim drop coverage, how that's going to factor in this matchup, which, we'll see on Friday night. Before we wrap up, or not wrap up with the coaching talk, but more transition into some talk about your players, I want to get an overall perspective from you. And I don't want to pin you as like you're going to speak on behalf of every Hawks fan that exists, but you're the face of Hawks Fan TV. So I think you can give me a good pulse. What's a disappointing season look like this year? Because I know that there's a lot of expectations, like the Knicks have expectations. Some, like Bobby Marks picks us to go to the finals. Everyone on our staff picked us 4th or 5th, right? So with the Hawks, I'd imagine you have high expectations, but what does disappointment look like?
I think disappointment would definitely be like another sub 500 type of season, right? Even if we just finish like 2 or 3 games above 500, I think that's a pretty big disappointment from the expectations that we have. And of course, anything like worse than a 6 seed is a big disappointment, in my opinion. People at Hawks Fan TV, we had a season prediction article that just came out the morning of yesterday, and all of us pretty much had us at minimum at like 47, 48 type of win season. I predicted we would have 53 wins and we'd be a top 4 seed. I think I had us right at 4. And I think you look at the last 2 years, Andrew, playing last year, playing the year before that, and then the year before that, we had that ECF run. So to quote my good man, Sean, progression is never linear, right? So progression is not always linear. We had high hopes coming off that ECF run and then fell off in the play-in, and then got gentlemen swept by the Heat. And then last year, better performance. We took Boston to 6, won a couple of games. Trae Young kind of went back to his playoff mode self, averaging like 31 points for that series. So I don't expect us to be in the play-in again. I think with an elite coach, in my opinion, in Quin Snyder, we have now kind of everything, all the pieces. I don't think the Hawks are good enough to contend just yet. I think we still need maybe one more piece, but we're certainly, with the coaching and the players that we have now, I think we should be able to get at least a top 5 seed at minimum. We had talent in previous years, but we just didn't have that coaching piece. And now that we have a good coach and a good staff, and still retain most of our talented players, I think it should be a top 5 seed at minimum. Anything worse than that should be a disappointment, in my opinion.
So I just pulled up my preseason predictions. I have the Hawks 6th. So if my predictions come true, it's a disappointing season, you're saying, even if the Eastern Conference is pretty crowded.
No, I mean, even if we finished at 6, I wouldn't consider that a big disappointment, especially if it's like the top 5 are really, really good and they're all like 50-win teams or more than 51-win teams. And, the Hawks are at like 49 or 50 wins. No, I wouldn't consider that a disappointment. But if we're in the play-in, then yes, like if we're a 7 seed or below, then that's a disappointment. Absolutely.
So let's play this out. They get in the play-in again this year, and like say they're the 7 seed, they win the 7-8 game, and it's a gentleman sweep against Boston or Milwaukee, right? What happens with the Hawks? Because it's game 1, so it's tough to play out that scenario at 82 games from now. But if you could project a little bit, like how much security does this current roster have?
Yeah, I mean, if that happens and we're another play-in team and get gentlemen swept in the first round, I'd expect some pretty major changes. I'd say like we'd probably let go of like 2 starters from that squad. But again, it's still so early in the season. It's really hard to say. Like I can't even fathom us going in the 7th seed again. Like my mind doesn't comprehend that.
Oh, wow.
Right, so I can't even give a what if moment.
So then recognize you're on Knicks Film School. Give me your top 6 that you projected for the season.
So I think at least I think there's clear tiers in the East right now. I think like the top tier, objectively speaking, would be on paper at least Milwaukee and Boston, right? So I would have personally, I have the Bucks as the 1 seed, the Celtics as the 2nd seed, and then that's tier 1. Then you have the tier 2 teams that I would consider like Philadelphia, and I'm still not fully bought into Cleveland. I know a lot of people
really?
Are super high. Yeah. Like, they talk about the defense and this and that. And Cleveland's a good team. Like, I think they're definitely one of the better teams in the East. But I've seen some people have them as high as like the 3rd seed, maybe even the 7th seed. I saw even another guy.
You mean the 2nd seed? You mean the 2nd seed?
Yeah, the 2nd seed. Yeah, 2nd seed, 3rd seed. But I can't say I'm fully bought in Cleveland. I think they're going to be at least a good regular season team. I guess I'm kind of using my playoff bias because I don't think Cleveland's going to do well in the postseason. I think they're going to, if they make the playoffs, I think they're going to lose in the first round to whoever they play again. But I think at least for the regular season, I think they're good enough to make the 4th seed, or maybe even the Knicks could make the 4th seed. But as far as that 2nd tier after Boston and Milwaukee would be Philly, Cleveland.
Still Philly, by the way, just to not interrupt you, but you still have them in that tier?
Yeah, I mean, they still have Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid's a great regular season player. If you guys have been following me, or if anyone that watches this follows my account, I'm very low on Joel Embiid come postseason time. I think he's a great player in the regular season for the first 82 games, and I think him alone with some of their other role players is good enough to get at least like a top 4 seed. Yeah, postseason, completely different story. I don't think anyone's worried about Philly, and neither should they be. But yeah, Philly, 3rd seed, or Cleveland, Knicks. And I'm gonna throw the Hawks in there personally. I think the Hawks would be kind of that tier 2 team that's close to the Knicks and Cleveland and Philly mark. So I think those 4 teams could finish anywhere from 3 to 3 to 6. And then the bottom, the tier 3 teams in that 7, 8, 9 range. Or actually, I'm sorry, I would throw Miami in there too. I forgot about Miami. So Miami's also up there. And then you got like Indiana. Who else? Charlotte, or not Charlotte, Indiana.
I think that's the end of the tier, to be honest. Yeah, that's if you are high in Indiana, like I am. But so we have the same top 6. I think I'm so fascinated by this Atlanta roster because John Collins. Well, I guess I'll ask you first. What was your reaction to the John Collins trade after years of having him in trade talks? For those who can't see, it goes on the podcast. 2 thumbs up from Alex on the John Collins.
2 thumbs up for me. I think I appreciate him. He's a really cool guy, right? I think JC was actually probably the coolest like interviewer on the team. Anyone that I've ever spoken to. Really cool personality. Wish him the best. But just not a good fit anymore, right? Can't create his own shot, can't dribble, can't back down like 6'4" guard defenders in the post with him being 6'9". So that's unfortunate. And he also he lost his 3-point shooting ability. For up until last year, he was like a career like 38% 3-point shooter, respectable, definitely reliable if left open. But last year, his 3-point shot just completely plummeted. And then he essentially became like a non-factor on offense. It was bad. So I think for both parties, it was a good move, and I'm happy. And now we had Jalen Johnson kind of waiting to get the torch passed over to him. And I'm excited. I think Jalen Johnson's going to ultimately be like 3 times the player John Collins was for us.
So game 1 displayed that in all its glory. I'm curious how the Knicks defended, although they have some bench options that they can, and obviously some elite bench play with Emmanuel Quickley and when at times Josh Hart. But I'm really curious how this matchup goes on Friday night, it being the Hawks home opener as well. Unfortunately, Trae Young does not have to go to the building, or for I don't know if it's for you or for me, doesn't have to go to Madison Square Garden this time, which he allegedly owns, if you believe a certain narrative. Let's talk about Trae Young.
He's had some good performances in MSG. I will say
he has had some good performances. I would like to point out he's under 500 at MSG, but that's like, it's not taking away. The idea of owning a building, like Reggie Miller owned the Garden, even though he lost more than he won.
What was Trae's playoff record in MSG?
Oh yeah, but but did Trae Young own the Garden, or did everything own Julius Randle in that series?
That is true. That is true.
Let's talk about Trae Young a little bit, because it's venom for Knicks fans, I think, to actually acknowledge some of his elite abilities. Like his ability to get to the line. I'm going to open up a little bit to you, Alex, as some personal growth I had last year. I used to be one of these haters that said he's just a flopper. The way he gets to the line, he's a Scott Foster merchant. He's just baiting people into fouls. It's not basketball. Like de Blasio speaking for us when he's calling them out in the playoffs. And then last year, I met a man named Jalen Brunson and saw how he is able to, with his craft, get to the foul line at will. And Julius Randle adopted the same principles. And by inertia, I think RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley were able to take advantage of the same skills. And it's got me to appreciate how Trae Young, with his size, has to create offense that way. Can it get annoying at times? Yes, but I can't complain about it anymore because my team benefits from the same type of craftiness when it comes to getting to the foul line. My honest evaluation of Trae is that he has such an elite, like an all NBA ceiling, but his shooting sometimes can hold him back because of how inconsistent it can be. My question is that a fair assessment? And if I'm off, how would you assess Trae Young after this is going to be year 6 for him, right?
This would be year 6. Yeah. Going into year 6. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's pretty fair. I think a lot of people with Trae, ever since day one as a rookie, a lot of people labeled him as a bust and this and that. He's too small and he's not athletic enough and blah, 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 blah. And then in the regular season, like in his first 2 years, like he was, he averaged 30 and 10 in his sophomore season. But then people looked at his record and it was like, oh, he's just a high volume scorer on a really bad, non-playoff team, which is fair. Third season comes around. We make the playoffs. We make the ECF. And he averages like 30 and 10 in the postseason. Also some really historic moments, some great moments, game winner at MSG and, his 48 performance against the Bucks, the list goes on. Mm-hmm. And so then it was all about the only thing they could pick on was like, oh, well, he's a really bad defender and he shoots inefficient. And there's definitely some merit to that, Andrew. I think the efficiency certainly needs to be better. And it's tough. Like I can't defend that. There are some nights where he will shoot really poorly and it does hurt this team definitely, in the long term when he's shooting that bad, or even not even his shooting percentage, but more so like his shot selection, right? His shot chart, his shot profile. A lot of people will get onto him for like shooting threes early in the shot clock without a single teammate like under the basket for a potential offensive rebound opportunity. So like those things definitely, aren't the funnest things to watch. And I think that's probably the biggest criticism that I have as a Hawks fan, but also I'm a big Trae Young fan, obviously. You can't see it, but I have a little Trae Young bobblehead like right under here. But yeah, I mean, unbiasedly, like objectively speaking, I think Trae's biggest like hindrance is like his splits and the turnovers. So like I think sometimes he gets in the bad habit of like trying to make some really crazy passes and a lot of the times they work and you see the highlights all over the place. And then sometimes they end up being like not the smartest decisions making that type of pass. So we'll see what happens. I've always said, wait till he hits his prime and wait till he matures his game a little bit. He's still 24. He just turned 24 in September or 25. I don't remember exactly, but he's still young. He's not even in his prime just yet. But I think by this point, year 6, hopefully those turnovers shrink and he just plays smarter. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, rough first game, rough shooting night, but he was still making a lot of passes, playmaking, and getting to the line, like you said. And I feel like people only look at his shooting. Like if he's not shooting well, then he's just playing like trash that night. But people forget like how amazing of a playmaker and facilitator Trae Young is. Without any other all-star teammates since his career in Atlanta, he's never had a single all-star teammate other than like Dejounte Murray last season for the first time. But he's led the Hawks to top 3 offenses for the past like 3 or 4 years in a row. And that's all because Trae Young is the engine that makes the car move. And he's setting up his teammates, playmaking, sucking in the defense, and finding his guys for open shots. And there's only like maybe 3 players on planet Earth that can facilitate and play make like Trae. So I think a lot of that gets swept under the rug because people want to make fun of his defense or his bad shooting, but like people aren't realizing like how great of a passer he is. Like he's going to be like one of the greatest passers of all time, maybe when it's all said and done.
He's a really good passer. I can't go.
Yeah. Little optimistic take on the.
Yeah, when the words all time get thrown out, I have to just look at who is in the all time conversation. The best compliment I can give him is that, like you said, we're going into year 6, and he's been a consistent 25 and 9 over the portion of his career. As a Knicks fan, I like the Jalen Brunson experience has been so great so far that. Like I can appreciate like a guard that can get to the rim and create his own shot, and at that size still be able to get shots off against anybody. Like he was taking Porzingis one-on-one on that. When the thing that I will give Trae credit for that Jalen Brunson wasn't able to do on night one, that Brunson wasn't able to then like affect the game with his passing or get to the line 15 times. And Trae, like I said, shot poorly, but was able to impact the games in other ways. So that's like the best compliment I could give him. That not even on bad nights that he wouldn't
take it.
On nights he doesn't shoot well, he's still able to play well. The backcourt pairing with Dejounte Murray. Your 82 games, a couple playoff games, and one opening night game into this experience. How has it worked so far?
I think the pairings worked out perfectly fine. I don't think we had maybe the right personnel last year, nor the coach for a majority of the season to really take full advantage of their skill set. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were one of two backcourts in the entire NBA that had 20 plus points and more than 6 assists for your backcourt. So they definitely played their part. I was hoping Dejounte would average a little bit more points, like in that 22 to 24 point per game range. But, all things considered, with Nate McMillan coaching majority of the season, first time with the new team, new teammates, the list goes on. I think all things considered, he played well. Year 2, full season, full off season with Quin. He's gotten more comfortable with his teammates because for the most part, we are pretty much the same team. So I'm expecting big things. He made a point of emphasis during media day and this and that about how he's going to really focus more on the defensive side of things, kind of get back to his all NBA type of caliber defense that he had in San Antonio when he led the league in steals, yada, yada, yada. So I'm not expecting like a huge, massive point per game outburst. I think he could still give us like 20 to 21 points a game. But as long as he's playing like elite perimeter defense and still playmaking, giving us, 6, 7, 8 assists a night, then I'll take it. I'll take it. Whatever wins games at this point. For me, Andrew, I don't care about individual stats as long as this team is winning.
It's whatever works. If it's working, I'm not going to complain is where you're at right now. So I noticed this from game 1 that Quin staggered them a bunch. And then honestly, the fourth quarter run that the Hornets made was with Trae on the bench. Now, I want to point out, I'm very intrigued how the Knicks defend Jalen Johnson, because it was also when Jalen Johnson was on the bench. But is that a thing? Like, he's going to stagger them throughout the game and basically have his elite point guard, an all-star point guard on the floor at all times?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say because game 1, it could have very easily just been.
I'm saying back to last year, the 20 games after the break, did he stagger them? And is that something you think he's going to do during the season?
He didn't stagger them as much. Nate McMillan did, but then when Quin took over, he didn't really. I don't remember him staggering Trae and Dejounte all that much. I noticed that in game 1, where like especially like in the first quarter, Trae was the first sub out, and they kept Dejounte and a few other people. But yeah, Trae was one of the first or second people subbed out in that first substitution. So I think Quin is just tinkering, seeing what works, what doesn't. Especially right now, we don't really have a solidified backup point guard at the moment. So I think by that, you kind of just have to have at least one of those two players on the court at all times. So I'm excited to see, it's much like you. I don't know what Quin's going to do. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see. Now, there's 2 things before we get out of here that I want to do with you. The first one, I'd like to get to know the other fan base. I didn't do that a lot last year. I more just got like the upcoming, like tell me about the Knicks opponent and how the season's going. But I want to ask you a specific fan base related question. And whereas I have no idea where the Hawks would fall in this conversation for Knicks fans, teams that Hawks fans hate the most, like the games you circle on the calendar. Give me the top 3, the 3 biggest rivals or most hated teams by Hawks fans. And if it's the Knicks, like that's fine, Yeah,
I mean, honestly, I don't know many other teams that would take that. I mean, I think Knicks could comfortably be top 3 just because it's always just a fun little good banter, in my opinion. Like personally for me, I like when the Knicks talk trash the most. Like when other teams talk trash, it's just like lame and stupid. At least Knicks fans, like y'all are funny at least, right? So when you like, make a joke or something, I at least chuckle at most of them. So I personally prefer like beefing with Knicks fans just because they're funny at least. Some other rivalries, I mean, honestly, I really dislike the Heat. I probably dislike the Heat more than the Knicks just because they're just Super arrogant, all about like the hashtag heat culture bullshit, whatever. And they talked a lot of trash 2 seasons ago when we matched up with them in round 1. So I'd say the Heat for me is up there. And then honestly, I also really hate the Celtics. Like, and this, dates back to like the 08. This started back since like 08, right? When we were the 8th seed, the Celtics were the 1 seed, and we pushed them to 7 games. And, the infamous, Zaza Pachulia quote, nothing easy. So, yeah, I mean, and ever since then, I've just hated Celtics fans. So, yeah, for me, it would be probably Celtics number 1, Heat, and then Knicks, I guess, would be like the third.
So the Heat, I get, they're a division rival. And maybe this is just an Atlantic Division thing, but so the Heat end up being my number 1 because like I grew up in the 90s and the infamous Alonzo Mourning, Patrick Ewing battles and like the fight that happened in 97 and then like the 8th seed getting there in 99. Like there's been playoff battles between the Knicks and Heat that I became a Knicks fan through them, which is why last season's exit, if there was anything that could damper how fun last year was as a Knicks fan, it was getting eliminated by this miracle run that the Heat were on. So is there no real division rivalry for the Hawks? I know you mentioned the Heat, but like the other teams, there's no beef there?
Honestly, for me, no. Like, yeah, the Heat would definitely be the closest thing to like a divisional rivalry. For a very small period of time, it was like, the Wizards back when they had. Yeah, but I wouldn't.
They matched up in the playoffs a few times, right? Like they're in the arenas years. Yeah,
they beat us. I think 1 year. They beat us 1 year, and it was either the first or the second round. But outside of that, I think we pretty much handled them every time we've played them in the playoffs. So
the year the Hawks won 60, the second round was against the
Wizards.
Right. The Wizards. Yeah.
Paul Pierce had that like crazy bank game winner, and they tied it up. But yeah, luckily we were able to close it out in 6 against them. So yeah, I mean, I can't really think of any other rivalries, honestly. I personally, like, this is off the record, but like these guys aren't even rivals. But my most probably hated franchise in the NBA is definitely the Raptors, personally, for me. And I'll tell you why, Andrew, and all you listeners out there.
So I want to clear. Hold on, before you get into this, you said off the record on a podcast that's being recorded. So like,
oh, sorry.
Just a reminder that this is very on the record.
This is on the record. This is on the record. That's okay.
All right, let's hear it.
The Raptors talk trash and they walk around like they're the Lakers or something, right? And they're this historic team, but then they're a terrible team. Pretty much for the entirety of their franchise, outside of when Kawhi Leonard saved them, saved that team and basically gifted them a ring. They've been pretty mediocre, right? All those years with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry and this and that, where they would essentially never make it past the second round. I think they made it to the ECF once that year or in that era. But I just don't understand where the arrogance comes from, Andrew. I don't know why they talk as if they're like the top 3 greatest NBA franchises of all time. It blows my mind. I've been to Canada before, in person. Canadians are super nice. I like it. I think Canada's a beautiful country, but NBA Twitter Raptors fans, they're something else, man. It's crazy.
I haven't had many run-ins with
ask Sean.
So Sean, I know, believe me, I know Sean has had many run-ins with Raptors fans. So I've heard about Club 6ix9ine and how arrogant Raptors fans have been.
It's crazy.
I dated a Canadian for 2 years in college, so I am aware of how hostile Canadians can be when they want to be. So I'll vouch for your distaste for people north of the border. Although RJ Barrett's on my team and I don't hate him anymore.
I like Canadians.
So Canadians are cool. It's when they're Raptors fans. It's Raptors fans specifically. Yeah. Okay.
It blows my mind. It's crazy.
Gotcha. I shouldn't have said any more. I don't know if I ever hated RJ Barrett, by the way. And that leads to my last question, because I know someone's going to clip that. It's like, you don't hate him anymore, right? Because RJ has, speaking of hives, and speaking of Canadian hives, he has a loyal following, and I hope he does good things this year. Your assessment of the Knicks. I maybe a loaded question, but your thoughts, Alex, on the Knicks and what they've done over the last year. And reminder, you're with me. You're not arguing with someone that has like Emmanuel Quickly in his Twitter avatar. You're talking to me here. What's your thoughts on the Knicks and projecting for what they could be this year?
No, honestly, no trolling aside. I mean, I think the Knicks are good, right? I definitely think they're a playoff worthy team. I think they will be a top 6 seed, at least I think they'll at least definitely be like a top 7 seed. I don't know how far you guys are going to go in the playoffs though. Like, I think Jalen Brunson, like I wasn't as high on Jalen Brunson when you guys made the move initially last year, because I just didn't think Jalen Brunson was all that great, but he proved me wrong. I'm going to eat crow and admit like Jalen Brunson was a really, really, really good player for y'all last year. And I was very surprised, to be honest. But yeah, Jalen Brunson balled out. I think he's definitely like your clear-cut number 1 best player. And then Julius Randle, like when I look at the team, like Julius Randle, in my opinion, is probably the 2nd best player, right, on the Knicks. And there'll be some nights where he looks like an all NBA type of player. He's doing all these crazy things and he's getting buckets for you guys. And it's like, wow, Julius Randle looks like a top 3, top 4 power forward in the NBA. And then there's other nights where he looks like he's like a G League player and he's not putting in the effort and he's not getting back on defense. So, and trust me, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir. I know Knicks fans have had that Julius Randle experience where, you know, half the fans like really love him and half the fans hate him. They want to ship him off to Timbuktu. I don't know. And then the where things get a little scary for me is like that 3rd best player, right? Like who's the number 3 option? And I might get slack for this, but like I don't see it with RJ Barrett. Like I genuinely think he is like, if I had to rate him on NBA 2K, he would be like a 78, 79 type of player for me, right? Like he's not terrible.
That good or bad? I have no idea. I haven't played 2K in years, unfortunately.
Okay, so how would I make that comparison?
Well, so like what's Jalen Brunson? What are Julius and Jalen Brunson?
Okay, so Jalen Brunson. All right, I'll do a letter grading then, not the number. So like Jalen Brunson for me would be like a super high B+ type of player, right? Maybe even A-. Maybe you can even put him in the A- realm. Julius Randle's like a B-, probably B- type of player, and then you have RJ Barrett, who's just a C. Like he's not a C+, he's not a C-. He is just a straight up C. He's not horrible, but he's not that good in my opinion. So yeah, that's where I think if you guys can upgrade at the 3 and like find someone a little bit better than RJ Barrett, I think you guys will start cooking. And I also think maybe it is Julius Randle time. I don't know, but I think Jalen Brunson's really good. Dare I say, like he's borderline. I mean, he's an all-star caliber player. If he replicates the type of season he had last year, he's like an all-star caliber player. So I think the Knicks are going to be top 6 seed, top 7 seed at worst. And I think you guys definitely have the capabilities to win round 1, depending on who you play. I will say, I've been hyping you guys up for the past 5 minutes. So this is where my negative, I guess, pessimistic side goes. You guys played the Cavs, right? So I think that was a little bit of a gimme round. I'm happy you guys won. But
number 1 defense in the league is a gimme round. 2nd best net rating in the league was a gimme round.
Yeah, in the regular season. But again, they're super young. You know, besides Donovan Mitchell, like, you know, that was Darius Garland's first playoff run. That was, Evan Mobley's first playoff run, et cetera.
Quite literally, the Knicks did what the Hawks did to us a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
the Knicks
pretty much
went in 5 in the same pattern too, and won it in 5. You know?
Granted, I thought Cleveland was going to put a lot more of a fight.
But so did we. Believe me, I had Knicks in 6, and I was like a hesitant Knicks in 6. And by the time Game 4 rolled around, I was like, oh, they're going to win this thing in 5 games. You know,
I think in the regular season, like I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks had a better regular season than us. I think ultimately though, like where both of our teams are at, Andrew, I think like 2nd round is like pretty much like the ceiling for us, right? I don't know. We'll see. Unless this team just shows me something completely different under Quin Snyder, then maybe. But like where I see it now, I think like 2nd round's kind of like the cap.
You mentioned the tiers. I'm not confident enough to be like in a 7-game series, the Knicks would beat the Celtics or beat the Bucks. I think they would win a couple games. We saw it on opening night with the Knicks. Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle shot a combined 11 for 43. They missed 12 free throws. They were 14 to 26. They got some bullshit calls in the fourth quarter. Like the whistle going against them was so confusing from Madison Square Garden that I'm actually like still annoyed by it a day later. And they only lost by 4 points. That was a tie game with a minute and a half left. So like that's the testament. I was saying this last night on our post game. Like the testament of a Tibbs team is like so much can go wrong, but because of how hard they're playing and how disciplined they are and how much fight they're putting out each night, they're going to be in almost every game. It's when you're looking for a creative playoff offense that you may have to, bite the bullet with Tibbs. However, I'm curious to see how this plays out in a matchup against the Hawks on Friday night. And before I officially send you farewell, you went through your analysis of the Knicks without mentioning Emmanuel quickly. That's the third best player on the Knicks.
Oh yeah, I mean, I completely forgot, right? Like, I think IQ definitely has like 6 man of the year capabilities, right? Like, I think he's really solid. Completely forgot about IQ. Yeah, I mean, I would say IQ is definitely your third best player, like hands down. I would even dare to say, like, I didn't watch y'all's game last night, so I don't know if I'm going off last year. Like, yeah, I would even say. Actually, no, I'm not going to say that. But yeah, IQ, third best player, absolutely.
Were you going to go to second best player? Because there's no world he's the second best player.
No. I'm trying to think of another player like even that's better than RJ, like as like your fourth best player.
So let me address the RJ thing. There's no world that you can defend RJ's regular season last year as like, actually, when you look at it this way, it was really bad. He had this 8-game stretch in the playoffs that was this fully realized, like what you've been wanting him to do, finishing at the rim, passing on these rim reads as well. On like the pick and roll navigation was outstanding. And it was like, finally, like this is what we've been wanting RJ Barrett to be for the first 4 seasons. And there's a hope that something clicked. I don't care about FIBA. I just don't like it. These games do not translate to the NBA as far as I'm concerned. There are more recruiting opportunities as far as I go, but there are people that saw how good he was at FIBA and were like, okay, like RJ Barrett, he's officially good. Mm-hmm. I have at least now wiped the slate clean with him that he can be their fourth best player. And if RJ Barrett's your fourth best player, that version of him is your fourth best player, you're going to win a lot of games. So you're right, though, and I agree about the second round ceiling. That's where I am with the Knicks. I have them hopefully losing in the second round. Well, not hopefully. I hope they win the title. But like realistically, I would sign up right now for a second round exit. And then they'll potentially go star hunting. So we'll see. Yeah, in fact, that's actually the last question I was going to ask you, because every fan base has their one like star trade, star target that they want. I know the season just started, so we're both fine with our rosters. But who's the one guy that Hawks fans in particular, maybe you in particular, have been like, we're going to do this season and then we're going to go get blank? Like, who is it?
Well, I mean, this is completely unrealistic. This is like in a perfect world, but I've been beating this drum for like years now. But like literally a Trae Young and Giannis pick and roll would be the most like broken, overpowered thing you could ever think of in NBA history, in my opinion. So
yes, Giannis and any point guard pick and roll, which you're going to see it with.
Like especially Trae though, and you're like literally the best pick and roll point guard in the league. I think it would just be like if you just spam that all night, it would just be unstoppable. So yeah, my like dream trade scenario is Giannis. I'm still also like happy with Joel Embiid. I don't think Joel Embiid can be your number one option or like the alpha of your team, but I think Trae Young can take Joel under the wing and, pull out some of that gamer mentality. Because we all know Joel is kind of soft. He's super soft, especially in the postseason. And he just needs that kind of like fire lit under his ass,
So Trae Young is going to be the alpha on a team with Joel Embiid.
Look, the only time they've ever played each other when it matters in the postseason, Trae Young got the best of them.
Or did Joel Embiid's teammate decide not to shoot the basketball when he was in the dunker spot?
Hey, it's a lot of, he
like, I know what you're doing, scoreboard. Like, I get it.
There was a lot of variables, Andrew, a lot of variables that could be said both ways. Like, what if the 76ers never had Seth Curry like have literally the best 6-game stretch of his entire human existence. Like it could have been like a gentleman's sweep. I don't know. And so there's a lot of what ifs, right? I think a lot of lucky things happened to Philly as well. As I mentioned, like that Seth Curry performance where he's never played that well in a stretch of like 4 to 5 games ever for his life, and a few other things. So we'll see. I mean, Joel Embiid, again, been in the league longer than Trae, never made it past the second round. And yeah, I think Joel has a tendency to fold come postseason.
The folding accusations are just something he's going to have to beat, like get to a second round so no one mentions it. Get to a third round so no one mentions it.
How much longer are we going to give him, Andrew? Like
I think it was going to have to take a next team. I do think there's been some incompetence with his organization as well. Like the teammates that, like, I will say last year was the year that I was actually like, all right, Joel, like you're up 3-2 and you got game 6 at home. Like this is something, an MVP wins this game and closes a series out. And we saw what happened, especially that game 7 where they were literally attacking Embiid in pick and rolls. And it's like, wow, you're the MVP of the league getting attacked in game 7. That's not a good look. Year before, James Harden decided he didn't take a field goal attempt in game 6 of their closeout game. And then the year before that was when
they played us.
The Ben Simmons malfunction short circuit game. I think he's elite. I think if you put him in the right organization, he could be even more elite. I recognize he's going to have to just beat the accusations at a certain point, or else then he's just going to be Dame for a while. And Dame, it took forever for him to get to a third round. So I guess we'll see what happens. Is there any like a Siakam or a Paul George or another target that Hawks fans, because you named the MVP and the MVP, like a former MVP as your targets?
I don't even know, honestly. Like,
so Hawks fans are cool with their team, is what you're saying. There's no, maybe this is a Knicks thing,
definitely,
you know?
I still think we need like a third kind of like solidified star, and maybe Jalen Johnson can be that, which is why like I'm okay with not when we didn't pull the trigger on the Pascal trade, because there were still like a lot of question marks around the 4 spot and this and that. But Jalen, if he reaches his potential, I think he could definitely be like that third best player. But I think we ultimately do need to upgrade at the 3, right? Like DeAndre Hunter, and I'm sure Knicks fans are very familiar with DeAndre Hunter, same draft class as RJ, and I know they've had similar comparisons, right? But you know, DeAndre Hunter, former 4th overall pick, and he's like the prototypical, like every 3-and-D type of player, like that fits the mold, right? Big, long, athletic, strong. But he's just, I don't know, like he just hasn't lived up to his potential. Maybe Quin Snyder can unlock something, but he's fairly old now. Like I think he's 26 or 27, something like that. Maybe a little younger actually, but he's going into year 5. And I feel like he just is what he is at this point. So if anything, I think that small forward position probably needs the biggest upgrade, whether it be someone like Paul George or whoever. But we'll see.
We'll see. And we'll see how the Hawks look in this matchup against the Knicks on Friday night. Alex, as always, thank you for making some time for me, my friend. Before you get out of here to a bunch of New Yorkers and Knicks fans around the world, tell us where we can find your stuff.
Yes, sir. Yeah. You can find us, all of our written content at www.hawksfantv.com. And then all of our socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at HawksFanTV. So yeah, we're very active on Twitter, as Andrew, knows, like I'm tweeting every single day. And yeah, I like to get under people's skin. That's just kind of, I think that's what Twitter is for. I think everyone should have some fun on the Bird app. So you can find us at HawksFanTV. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Do you recognize that there are people that don't think you're just having fun? Like when you're doing it to have fun, like what's going through your mind? We're like, oh, they think I'm serious. Like,
I think it's hilarious to be honest. Like I feel like, and then there's some tweets where I feel like this is overly like sarcastic and exaggerated. Like there's no way someone can believe this. Like I made a tweet the other day when Victor Wembanyama had a really good preseason game. It was towards the end of preseason. And I said, like, Victor reminds me of Trae Young, but just taller, right? Just like completely joking. Just completely joking. And people actually thought I was serious. But like, hey, it's Twitter. I'm verified and we get paid for engagement. So why not?
Might as well. There you go. Alex, thank you for coming by, my man.
Of course. Thank you for having me.